you are in the midst of a profound cultural drift. There is a current that's coming against you that you're not even aware of. But if you don't become aware of it, it's like getting caught in a riptide. You're going to end up at a destination you would not have chosen.
It's our limiting beliefs that ultimately keep us from becoming the best we're capable of becoming. Something's got to change, but that change has to happen first on the inside. It's time to get unstuck. It's time to get your why back. It's never too late. Let's start today.
Helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. This is Win Today. And now, here's your host, Christopher Cook.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the show this week. Thanks as always for the download. This is episode 148 of Win Today, and this is your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. You know, I bet you know how frustrating it is to wake up for the day with plans to accomplish important tasks, only to find yourself overwhelmed and unaccomplished by the end of the day, right? You know this, everyone gets 168 hours a week, but it never feels like enough, does it? And you probably know what it feels like for work to eat up the majority of that time. In fact, many people today are working as much as 70 hours a week, leaving less and less time for rest, recreation, family, and friends, all the things that truly make life great. But you see, this is where a lot of people, me included, get hung up. Most people think productivity is all about finding or saving time, but it's not. Instead, it's about making our time work for us. It's about learning how to become free to focus. And that's the conversation we're having today with leadership and productivity expert Michael Hyatt. For years, Michael Hyatt struggled to balance it all. As the former chairman and CEO of one of the world's largest publishing companies, his success came at the expense of his health and his most valuable relationships. The turnaround for him, though, came when he realized the answer wasn't simply to get more done. Instead, success, Michael learned, is about getting the right things done. He soon discovered how to sync his daily activities with his most important goals and priorities, and since then, his life has never been the same. In today's conversation, Michael is going to share his groundbreaking method to become free to focus so that you will win at work and succeed at the rest of life, in your health, in your relationships, your hobbies, and more. He's going to help you redefine your goals, evaluate what's working, cut out the non-essentials, focus on the most important tasks, manage your time and energy, and build momentum for a lifetime of success. If you're tired of the overwhelm and want to be free to focus, buckle up because my conversation with New York Times best-selling author Michael Hyatt starts right now. Well, Michael, this is such a treat to have you on this show. I've been following you for years, have been a student of Platform University, and have honestly gained more tactical strategies about content creation from you than from anyone else. So thank you so much for that, and welcome to the show.
You're so welcome, Chris. Good to be on the show with you.
Thank you so much. Well, today, Michael, we're talking all about your brand new book, Free to Focus. And where I'd like to start today is by talking about the other side of focus, which is stress. Take us back in your own story, if you would. How much stress were you carrying earlier in life?
Yeah, quite a bit as it turned out. And I really wasn't aware of it, which was the problem, until I ended up in the ER 3 times in a row, thinking I was having a heart attack, and which is a kind of a scary thing, because then every time after you go the first time, every time you get sort of palpitations in your heart, you think, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. Every time I would go, they would say, no, your heart's fine. And so finally the third time, the guy in the ER said, you got to see a cardiologist about this. So I went to a cardiologist who ran me through a nuclear stress test. And then he said to me, look, your heart's fine. You're perfectly healthy. He said, you're suffering from acid reflux, which I know in 90% of my patients is a result of stress and lifestyle. He said, what is going on in your life? Well, I'd been involved in trying to turn a division around in the company that I was working for about 18 months. And I was working evenings, weekends, not taking any vacations, not exercising, not eating well, and just, go with no breaks. And it was taking its toll on me. And so my cardiologist said to me, he said, look, he said, this is a very, you're at a fork in the road. It's a very simple decision. He said, but you got to choose wisely because you may end up in the ER for real, and I may or may not be able to help you. So you've got to fix this stress thing.
So coming out of that experience, I'm sure you made some pretty deliberate and immediate changes to your life. What were they?
Yeah, I did. Well, one of the very first things I did was I hired an executive coach who happened to be Daniel Harkavy, with whom I wrote the book Living Forward.
Ah, yes.
He was my executive coach for about 10 years. But the very first thing we did, very first thing after a consultation on the phone, was we rolled up our sleeves and I went to work on a life plan. And so I began to move from what Daniel and I came to call drifting to designing. So instead of just, kind of being reactive to life and taking the next thing that comes off the conveyor belt and reacting to it, I decided at that point that I had to flip it around, be proactive, and begin to design and be very deliberate about where I wanted to end up in terms of my health, in terms of my family, in terms of my business, in terms of my schedule, all the rest. And so that life planning exercise was huge. And of course, I also did it in consultation with my wife, Gail. So it was great for us to just be aligned about what it was that we wanted for the future.
Yes, indeed. Well, based upon that, Michael, what's important for our listeners to understand about not only stress management, but creating, as you just said, purposeful priorities in life? And the reason I ask, Michael, is because everything we talk about here on Win Today is around the topic of wholeness, and it's spirit, soul, and body, and it's synchronous.
Yes, I totally get that. Well, I think the thing that I would say is that we live in a culture where everybody is busy, and all the things that promise to make our lives easier and to save us time have actually brought on more stress and more work. So the smartphone is the best example of that. But we live in a world where, particularly among entrepreneurs and business leaders, we live in this sort of hustle fallacy that in order to achieve more, you've actually got to do more. So you've got to put in more hours, do more work, take on more. And in my view, that's a recipe for burnout. And that's not the purpose of productivity. So one of the first things I do in the book, as you know, is I go back to the very beginning and say, okay, what is the purpose of productivity? We got to get clear on kind of a productivity vision for our life if we're going to hope to have any kind of semblance of balance where we have a personal life where we can win at work, but also succeed at life. And that's really what I'm after, is that double win. Not the hustle fallacy, but the double win.
Yeah. The culprit behind our ability to become free to focus is what? Is it the digital distractions? Is it everything that's vying for our attention? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's all the other demands that are on our life, all the things that interrupt us, the things that distract us, the things that populate our to-do lists and our schedules that we didn't initiate, and again, we're just in a reactive mode. And that's where I think we got to flip the switch. We've got to decide that, look, nobody's going to design our life for us. Nobody's going to take command of our life. And if we're going to have a life that's well-pleasing to God and a life that's truly productive in all those areas you just mentioned, then we're going to have to be, intentional. We're going to have to be purposeful, and we're going to have to really get clear on what it is that we want and what we're willing to do to get there.
Yeah, I'd like to just stay there for a moment, Michael, because 96% of the listeners here at Win Today are Christ followers. And I think what you just said is so important for us to recognize, because our life is actually a stewardship issue. And all of us, Michael, someday are going to stand before God, and he's going to say, what have you done with what I gave you? And what I heard you say, Michael, is that our ability to get free to focus actually allows us to walk in greater purpose and steward our life to the best of our ability according to God's plan. Am I hearing you correctly in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to move from sort of feeling like we're a victim to feeling like we are stewards, that we've been given whatever gifts we have, whatever treasure we have, whatever time we have as a stewardship. And it's really interesting in that parable in Matthew 25 where Jesus does not tell those stewards where to invest, how to invest. He basically says, here are these gifts. I expect a return. Do your best. And it's up to them to figure it out. Now, obviously, we're going to figure that out in prayer, trying to discern God's will for our life and all the rest. But we've got to take responsibility.
And taking responsibility for our life, folks, requires us to be mindful of where we're distracted and where we're not focused. And so, Michael, that brings me to a question I'd love to ask, because in your book, you write that focusing on everything means focusing on nothing. I love that. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, so we think so often that we can do more than we really can, and life is a series of choices. When I got married 41 years ago, I made a choice. And there were a lot of options before I made that choice. There were a lot of women that I could have married, a lot of women that may have interested me, when I was in college. But when I made that decision to marry Gail, I forsook all others, and I just said, this is the one. I'm going to be married to her for the rest of my life. And so far, 41 years, it's going great. But, we have to see that all those distractions are things that if we're not careful can derail us. So we've got to take responsibility for focus so we can be purposeful. And it's those distractions, those interruptions that threaten to take us off the path and threaten to compromise our stewardship. So it's imperative for us that we get clear about where it is we're going, how we're going to get there. And so we've got some kind of framework for being able to say no to interruptions, no to distractions, so that we can stay focused and be productive servants.
Michael, if we don't harness what you just said, this is going to sound overly simplistic, but I want everyone joined in this conversation to get a hold of this. Michael, what's at stake?
Well, first of all, our stewardship and ultimately our accountability to God.
Yeah.
I think that if we're not careful, what we can do is we can be so distracted that we don't invest the talents we have, or we scatter them so broadly that we never get the opportunity to see the return on the investment. And so often, seeing the return on an investment is staying focused through the ups and the downs, and just staying focused on the opportunity or the calling. And so, what's at risk is, I think, our callings, our health, our marriages, our relationship with our kids, our productivity at work, our vocation, and I believe all of us have a vocation, but basically everything.
Indeed. Well, that leads us to the meat of our conversation today then, Michael. Step 1 in your 3-step process in your book, Free to Focus, is to create the freedom to focus, to stop. Now, that seems really counterintuitive, but I'd love to know more.
Yeah, so the book has 3 parts, and the first part is stop. And it is counterintuitive, because you think if you're going to read a book on productivity that you want to go, take action, get in the game, make progress. But the problem is, because we live in this sort of hustle economy where everybody's running faster than they really probably should be, and certainly driving faster than the vehicle they're driving they can control, that it's time that we kind of step off the hamster wheel and say, wait a second, we got to stop. We got to be reflective. We've got to think about where this trajectory that we're on, this trend that we're on, where is it going to lead if we don't recalibrate? And so that's what I invite the readers to do in the first 3 chapters of that first section, is to really stop, to really evaluate their own productivity, and to get very clear on what they need to do to move forward, to go the distance, and really to create a sustainable life where they are productive stewards.
That's really good. Well, Michael, I'd love to spend some time on the third objective of productivity, which you write about, which is freedom. Talk about the freedoms that stopping affords us.
Yeah, I love this, because to me, the ultimate goal of productivity is not more productivity or more work, because we got people today that are working. I mean, the average person that has a smartphone is working 70 hours a week. That's not freedom. That's more like slavery. And so in the book, in that first chapter, I talk about 4 kinds of freedom. First of all, the freedom to focus, to really be able to do the deep, kind of meaningful work that moves the needle in your business and your personal life, that drives results, that yields a kind of return that our employer, if we're employed, expects, or our customers, if we own our own business, expects. And so I want that ability to focus. You can't focus when you're multitasking, when you're jumping between tasks, when you're only spending 5 minutes on something, you get bored and then you jump off that. The really most important work takes kind of creative depth. It takes analytical depth. It takes more time than that. So the freedom to focus is the first freedom. The second freedom is the freedom to be present. And so often, you're out to a restaurant and you might see a couple across the room, and And they got their heads in their phones instead of talking to each other. And I see this all the times with families in restaurants too, where Gail and I were at a restaurant the other day. It was actually after church on Sunday. And we saw this couple and they were talking and that was fine, but they had 2 kids there, both of whom had their heads in devices and were not present at all. Well, I want the kind of productivity that enables me to be present so that if I'm sitting in a meeting at work, I could be fully present, not worried about what's happening at work or at home. By the same token, if I'm at dinner with my family or if I'm at one of my grandkids' soccer games, I don't have to be worried about work or constantly checking email or checking Slack messages. I can be actually present there. So I want the freedom to be present. The third kind of freedom I want is the freedom to be spontaneous so that my life is not so overprogrammed, so scheduled, so stuffed to the gills that there's no margin that, for example, when my grandkids drop by the office, I want to be able to stop and really focus on them. Or if I've got a friend who gives me a call and says, hey, I got an issue that I need some feedback on. Do you got 30 minutes sometime today? I can stop and say, absolutely, let's do it. How about 3:00, whatever. And then finally, the freedom to do nothing at all. And I learned the value of this when I was in Italy a couple of years ago. Gail and I spent 30 days over there. We take a 1-month sabbatical every summer, and we've done that since 2011. And so we were in Italy in this one summer, and one of the things that we noticed is that the Italians do a great job of this. About 5:30 in the afternoon, people start pouring out into the plazas and just begin to socialize and enjoy one another. And they actually have a word for it that translates into, or a phrase that translates into, the sweetness of doing nothing. And it's in that nothing, when you're doing nothing, that some of the most meaningful connections are made, some of the best creative ideas come to us, some of the biggest advances in our business come to us. But it doesn't happen when we're so programmed that we don't have time to just relax. And this is, by the way, why we so often have great ideas in the shower, because we're relaxed.
Yeah.
When we're out for a run, anytime we're relaxed, we can get great ideas. And so the freedom to do nothing. So those 4 freedoms are kind of what I'm after.
Michael, pull the curtain back in your own life then, because I would say most of us that are listening to the show are familiar with you and know that you were the CEO at a very large publishing house, and then you left and ventured in this journey of writing full-time and speaking full-time. And now you've got this amazing company, and I know it has grown exponentially in the last few years. What has freedom looked like for you? Because on the outset, it looks like, okay, as a CEO, your schedule's just got to be crazy. And then starting this very successful business, it would appear maybe your inbox is just going nuts and your phone is ringing off the hook. What does freedom look like for you?
That's a great question, because I think that one of the things that was frustrating to me when I was the CEO at Thomas Nelson is that literally every minute was programmed. And even my social events were programmed. Well, here's what freedom looks like for me now. So last year, my business, 2018, my business grew 62% over 2017. But I took 160 days off. That meant every weekend. That meant 11 weeks of vacation, including one 4-week sabbatical where Gail and I were in Canada. And during this time off, and I have to understand my rules for time off. My rules for time off are I can't think about work. I don't do work. I don't read about work. I don't talk about work. So, and by the way, the only way you do that is it's not that you just say, okay, I'm not going to think about work, because that's a guaranteed way to think about work. It's like, don't think of pink elephants.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is you have to have hobbies and things that you can read that aren't business books, and some intention around building relationships that are outside of work. And so, so last year I took more time off than ever. I went fly fishing 5 different times. It was great. I took more time off than ever, and yet my company grew faster and bigger than ever before.
And I'd like to propose, because I bet there are people listening say, well, Michael, of course you're able to do that. You own the company. But I'd like to kind of push back on that assumption that people might quickly have and say, you actually intended to create this from the onset. So as the business scaled, you knew that this was one of your primary objectives. Was that a correct assumption? I'd like to kind of get behind that. Okay.
Yeah. So really sort of, I think the foundation of the prerequisite to innovation is constraints. So this is exactly the opposite of how most people think about it. They think, oh my gosh, if I had unlimited money, unlimited time, then I could really be free to innovate. No, it's actually just the opposite. It's like when I said, for example, that I want to take this was in 2017, when I was planning 2018 with my assistant, I said I want to take 160 days off this next year, and we literally have a spreadsheet. We have a tool called Spend Your Days on Paper, and so I mapped out 160 days. I said I want to take this time off, and everything else has got to fit in this, but I'm not going to give up my desire to continue to grow the company and continue to create opportunity for our people. So yeah, it was very intentional. And by the way, Chris, one of the things I want to say too, it'd be fine if all this worked for me, but doesn't work for anybody else. So I have about 350 coaching clients, and our average coaching client, and we do these in cohorts of 60, so it's group coaching. Okay. But our average coaching client within the first 12 months grows their revenue by 67%. Wow. And cuts their work week by 11 hours. That's on average. Some get more, some get less, but on average, 67% growth on the top line and 11 hours shaved off their work week. In addition to that, I really believe in this for my employees. We give them unlimited PTO so they can take paid time off as they wish. They got to get it approved. They got to coordinate it with their department. But we don't put any, we don't say you get 3 weeks of vacation. We say unlimited PTO. And then we also say to them, first of all, we don't expect them to work on nights or weekends. We frown on anybody working more than 40 hours a week. And we give them a 30-day paid sabbatical once every 3 years.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible.
Well, I'll tell you what, the counterintuitive part of it is, it means that when they're at work, they're rejuvenated. They're rested, they're focused, and they're outrageously productive.
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. And Michael, I can only imagine that, because the principles in the book are so rock solid, but one of the tools I believe that you bring to the forefront for us to help us create greater focus is using the freedom compass. Is that perhaps where this would come into play in helping people design their focus? Could you talk about the freedom compass?
Yeah, so I talk about that in chapter 2 under evaluate.
Yes.
And so, if we're going to make progress, we got to figure out where we are, and we got to do sort of some assessment. And so I came up with this tool called the Freedom Compass, and basically it's a 2x2 matrix that's rotated 45 degrees. But the way it looks, think of a traditional compass. True north is where passion and proficiency come together. Those are the actual 2 axes of the Freedom Compass. So passion, what you love to do, what you enjoy doing, and proficiency, what you're good at, but good enough that you actually drive the results that your boss expects or that your customers expect. So it just can't be good in the abstract, but it has to be good in the real world in terms of somebody's willing to pay you to do it. That we call the desire zone. That's true north. The more time you spend in the desire zone, the more productive you're going to be. And in fact, I would say this, that is where we find God's will. I really believe that God has wired us up in such a way that the things that we love to do, the things that we're naturally good at and acquire the skills to be good at, that drive the results, are the things that God has called us to do. That's our vocation. Mm-hmm. Now, the exact opposite of that, due south on the Freedom Compass, is where there's no passion and no proficiency. So we call that the drudgery zone. And it's different for everybody, thank God. But so for me, in my drudgery zone is basically anything that has to do with administration. Mm-hmm. So managing my own email, managing my calendar, booking my own travel, filing expense reports, that stuff I don't enjoy doing, and I'm not very good at it. If I try to manage my calendar, I inevitably make mistakes. I double book myself, I forget about appointments, all of that. Thankfully, Jim, my assistant, his desire zone is my drudgery zone. So the things that I don't love, the things that I'm not good at, happen to be the things that Jim really enjoys and the things that Jim is really good at. And so when you start setting up those kind of complementary relationships in a company, that's when you begin to really move the needle and increase the organizational productivity as well. So those are kind of the north and the south of the Freedom Compass. If you want, we could talk about the east and the west, but those are the north and the south.
Wonderful. Whatever you'd prefer. If that'd be beneficial, I'd love to just keep the floor open to you for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second, because there are 2 other directions on the Freedom Compass. So east is something I call the disinterest zone. This is where you don't have any passion, but you do have proficiency. So in other words, you don't really enjoy doing this particular activity or this kind of meeting or pursuing this kind of opportunity, but you're pretty good at it. And oftentimes it's the thing that pays the bills, and so people persist on doing it, but it's not the highest and best use of you. So here's an example. So as it turns out, I'm pretty good at accounting. I don't have a financial background. I definitely don't have any financial training. But one of the things that happened to me at Thomas Nelson is I got promoted through the ranks, and eventually when I became the CEO, most of my job was interfacing with the financial community. So analysts and advisors and Wall Street bankers and all the rest, because when I took over the company, we were publicly held, traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Mm-hmm. So even when I started my own company, I boned up on QuickBooks, learned enough about double entry accounting to figure it out. And you don't have to know much with QuickBooks, but I managed all my accounting. I was really good at it, but I had zero passion. And it wasn't the best and highest use of me. So as soon as I could replace myself, that freed me up to do more of the work that was in my desire zone. Now, the really interesting one, Chris, is what I call the distraction zone. That's due west. That's where you have passion, you enjoy doing it, but you're not very good at it, or it doesn't drive results. And this is often the place that we go to escape. So it's a place we sometimes go to play because it's easier work than the desire zone work. Because by the way, just because it's in your desire zone doesn't make it easy. The hardest work I do is the work I actually love. So whether it's writing a book or preparing for a speech or delivering a podcast like this, it's not easy work, but I love it. But in the distraction zone, we tend to go there because it's easier. It's the downhill work, and it's often the fake work that consumes a lot of our time but doesn't drive results. Another example from my own life. So after I started blogging in 2004, I found that I enjoyed graphic design and I enjoyed programming. And I knew just enough about both to be dangerous. So, and I found that it was a lot more fun tweaking my website, trying the latest, greatest WordPress plugin, redesigning my site than actually doing the thing that would drive the business forward, which was to create content. So it was funny. I brought my site down about 3 different times because I wasn't working on a development side. I was working on the live site.
Oh my goodness.
I was messing with the PHP code and all that. And so when I finally hired a web developer, he said to me, okay, I'll come to work with you on one condition. And that is you never, ever touch the back end of WordPress again.
Yeah.
And that was a distraction zone. And so once I released that and got rid of it, now all of a sudden I was able to focus more of my time on the desire zone. And today, 95% of my time is spent in the desire zone.
Michael, what I appreciate about you so much in everything you just said is you're not just a theorist, you're a practitioner, and I think you practice what you preach. This morning at the time of our recording on your Instagram story, you were talking about your startup ritual, and I remember you remarking about the fact that you get up at 4:45, and one of the things that you're doing now, again, is writing every single day for an hour. That's remarkable. And I think the why behind that is because of what you just said. You recognized where the greatest return on investment is. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's totally correct. So I really haven't rolled up my sleeves and gotten into the process of content creation since the summer of 2016. I mean, I would give input and the guys would pick my brain and all that. But mostly what we were doing is taking stuff that was in the archives and really, polishing that up or maybe adapting it or whatever. But in the summer of 2017, I spent about 6 weeks every day, all day, working on the book Free to Focus. And the rest of my time, since then has been mostly kind of on stage work, delivering, presentations and so forth. So what I woke up a couple months ago and realized that, the well's going to get dry if I don't go back in there and start creating content. But the only way I can do it, given my schedule today, is I've got to make it part of my morning ritual. And so that's what I did. Yeah. I mapped it out and I just said, I'm going to be able to do this and I'm going to be very disciplined and very diligent about it. And so at 6 a.m. sharp, that's when I'm done with my quiet time. I've spent a solid hour in my quiet time. And that's what I'm going to start writing. I'm going to write for a solid hour, and then I'm going to hit the gym at 7.
Well, Michael, let's move ahead to step 2, which is cut. And you begin this section of the book by talking about using a powerful word. It's a short word, and the word is no. Take us deeper into this.
Yeah, it's also a complete sentence.
It is. I love it.
Yeah, it's really hard for most of us to say no, right? I mean, I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Yes.
And a lot of us suffer from FOMO, the fear of missing out, right? So we don't want to miss an opportunity. We don't want to miss the opportunity to meet somebody new or a business opportunity or whatever. So it's hard to say no. But there's also a couple of other diseases. I call these sort of the ugly triplets. But there's FOMO. There's also FODO, FODO, the fear of disappointing others.
Yeah.
And I hate the thought of disappointing others. You know, if I say no to a request, I'm going to disappoint that other person, and that won't be good. And then the third one of these ugly three is FOCO, FOCO, the fear of conflict with others. You know, if I say no to that person, it's going to generate some conflict. Maybe they'll challenge me on it. I'll have to defend myself. And so it's just easier to say yes, except that you don't scale. You have 168 hours a week, and there's going to come a point where if you keep saying yes, you will absolutely, utterly destroy your life. You'll be living for other people's agendas. You will accomplish nothing of what God has given you to do. Even Jesus said no. I love the story when Lazarus is sick and his sisters send word for Jesus, and they say, come. Lazarus is sick. And he doesn't come. I mean, he doesn't come for a couple of days. And by the time he gets there, he's dead. And it was all for the glory of God. He wasn't rushed. He was able to say no. He would disappear into the wilderness and pray. A great while before dawn, when everybody else was still sleeping, he would get up. He would say no. I can envision him saying no to early morning coffee meetings just so that he could pray and be with his Father. So to me, learning to say no is key. And in that chapter, I talk about a simple formula or framework for saying no. And it's called the yes, no, yes formula. So it starts with yes, then you move to no, and then you finish with yes. And it's kind of the sandwich approach in a way, but it's not the sandwich like most people have heard of. And I learned this from William Ury, who is a professor at Harvard, who wrote a book called The Power of the Positive No. And so let me just give you an example.
Please, yes.
So even to this day, having been a former publishing executive and editor and literary agent, I get a lot of requests from people to review their book proposal. So they'll send me an email book proposal and they say, hey, you got a few minutes to look this over and give me some feedback? Well, truth is I don't. I get dozens of those every week.
Sure.
And so now what I say is I've got an email template, another little tool I talk about in the book. But what I'll typically say is the template says, and I'll warm it up with something personable at the first, but I'll say something like, hey, congratulations on getting a book proposal done. You've done what 95% of the people who say they want to write a book never do. So, kudos to you. So that's the yes. But then I want to move into an unambiguous, resolute no. So I'm not going to say maybe, but I'm going to say no. And here's what I'll say. In order to be faithful to my other commitments, I have to say no to invitations like this. So now I've kind of given them the rationale, and it's sort of under the umbrella of integrity because I've made other commitments that I want to be faithful to. And at some point, I'm not going to be faithful to those commitments if I keep saying yes to these outside requests. And I've given them an unambiguous no. Here's what I haven't said. Check back with me in 30 days.
Yeah, right. I was just going to ask that. Right.
So then what you have to do is you have to go through the whole stupid thing again. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather give them the hard medicine now. Brene Brown says, much better to disappoint somebody now than experience regret later because you didn't say no.
That's so true. I bet Jim serves as a pretty valuable gatekeeper then, right?
He does. And I think that's one of the best ways to use an executive assistant because he doesn't have the same emotional attachment that I do. He doesn't have the same desire to please. His job is to sort of be the goalie on my calendar, protect it. So then so that's the yes and the no. And just to finish with the final yes. And then I want to say something positive, like, all the best in getting your book published. You've done the hardest part of the work. Now you've got to write it, but all the best. And so I try to, leave them with something positive, some kind of positive send off. Now, occasionally, somebody may misunderstand me and honestly, this has never happened on this particular issue. But for the most part, most of the people write back and they'll say, well, I'm disappointed, but thank you for getting back to me.
Wow.
Because so often we let those kinds of email requests languish in our inbox because we don't want to say no and we don't say anything and we leave the person wondering And then that person gets angry because we haven't responded at all. And that just comes across as discourteous.
Yeah. Well, there's a question that's kind of stemming up from that, Michael, and I'm so glad you went there in the conversation because I hate text messages and email even more, especially the reply alls. So I'd love to know, and for all of us listening, how do you handle what feels like a culture-driven demand on all of us to be synchronous in our response time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got this question on a live Facebook thing yesterday, but let me just tell you what I do. I'm going to talk about text messages.
Please.
Because I hate text messages because, like you said, they're synchronous. You know, they're sort of the expectation that somebody texts you and you drop what you're doing and you respond back, which is exactly why I hate it. So here's the deal. You got to have 2 cell phone numbers. And most people listening to this will be thinking, I can barely afford 1 cell phone. How am I going to get 2 cell phones? Okay, the second one's going to be totally free. And this is through the magic of Google Voice. So Google will give you your very own local phone number for free. And what you want to do is you want to get that phone number, and that's going to now become your public phone number. That's going to be the number that you give to the dry cleaners. It's going to be the number you give to your dentist's office. It's going to be the number that you give to everybody but the ones that you deem in your inner circle. So for me, that's about 15 people. So that's my mom and dad, my wife, my daughters, my sons-in-law, the executives of my company. Those are the only ones that have my real cell phone number. Everybody else gets the Google number. They don't know any different. But in the Google numbers, or in the Google number, I turn off all the notifications so it doesn't ring on my phone, doesn't ring on my computer, doesn't ping me anywhere, but it does send me an email. And so then I process the email in the normal course of my asynchronous communication, which is my email inbox, which I'm doing twice a day. I'm gonna respond to the text messages that come there. And the cool thing is with Google Voice, you could actually just reply to the Google email and it'll be sent out as a text message back to the person who sent it to you. Is that cool?
That is sweet.
Now the downside of this is that people are going to expect an instant response. And here's what happens. When you respond instantly, you train them that that's how they can circumvent your inbox, your email inbox, and get an instant answer. So you don't want to train them that way. Yeah. So instead, what you want to say, particularly for a new relationship or somebody that is important, like a client, you want to say, hey, by the way, feel free to text me. If that's the easiest way for you to communicate, go ahead and text me. But I just want you to know, because I'm committed to doing deep work for you and for the other clients that I have, I don't respond to text messages except for 2 or 3 times a day. And whatever your practice is, tell them, but calibrate their expectation. The only time we get problems with this is when we don't calibrate the expectation. If we let them expect that they're going to get an instant response and they don't get it, they're going to be ticked. So just calibrate it on the front end.
Yes. That is so good. Michael, I just hit my mid-30s and I want to be my best and be healthy for the long haul. Talk to all of us listening who are in our mid-30s about the advice you'd give to your mid-30-year-old self.
I'd say you are in the midst of a profound cultural drift. There is a current that's coming against you that you're not even aware of. But if you don't become aware of it, it's like getting caught in a riptide. You're going to end up at a destination you would not have chosen unless you become intentional. You got to become aware of the drift, and you got to become intentional in designing your life. And this is really the entirety of my work. This is why I wrote Living Forward, because I really believe in having that 10 to 25 year vision for your life. That's the 35,000 foot view of your life. That's why I wrote Your Best Year Ever, because you need a view of where you want to go this year and where you want to end up in 12 months. So again, you're not caught in this cultural drift and end up against the shoals, losing your health, losing your marriage, losing relationships with your kids, losing your career, whatever it may be. So you've got to get intentional, and free to focus is ground zero. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you implement all this stuff and daily, incrementally move toward a bigger, better future. Indeed. So that's kind of, I guess that's what I would say is just realize that if you don't have a plan, if you're not intentional and deliberate, you're going to drift. And no one ever drifted to a destination they would have chosen.
Wow. Michael, where do you still struggle to say no and create optimal focus in your own life? What does that look like?
Yeah, I still struggle, man, because I really want to be helpful. I want to be useful. And I see so many needs. Like I'm on the board of a seminary in New York, and I was just up there last week at a board meeting, and there's so much work that needs to be done. I mean, any seminary, any graduate school of higher learning is struggling these days. And so I see all these needs and I think, oh my gosh, I need to get involved in the fundraising, and I need to get involved in, the strategic planning, and I need to be a coach to the CEO and all this stuff. And some of that stuff I can do, but at some point, I have to realize, come to grips with my own humanity and my own limitations. I know who God is, and I'm not God. And I can't just spend myself like I've got infinite resources to do that. But it's still, to this day, a struggle. It's kind of funny because I have to be careful, but I know that if I come back from a trip like that, I got to face Jim, my assistant. And I don't want to tell Jim that I committed to yet another thing, because Jim's like, dude, you have no time in your calendar. Like I am coaching the CEO, and Jim said to me, he said, could you move those coaching calls to once a month? And I said, Jim, I can't. I mean, honestly, I want to make them once a week, sure. but I'm compromising and making them every 2 weeks. But yeah, I still struggle with that because I want to be helpful.
Well, Michael, step 1, as we talked about, is stop. Step 2, cut. Here comes step 3, which is act. And Michael, this is where I've learned so much from you over the years in terms of designing my ideal week. Break this step down for us.
Yeah, so there's so much in this section. There's 3 different chapters, but yes, let's just talk about the ideal week. We can't cover it all. Sure. So the ideal week is the idea that if you had 100% control of your time, and none of us do, not even me, but if you had 100% control of your time, how would you spend it in your ideal week? So this becomes the prototype, the framework for how you design every week. Every week is going to be an approximation of what your ideal week would look like. So rather than letting other people populate your calendar, claim time on your calendar, assign to you tasks, the first thing you want to do is you want to take control of your calendar and say optimally, how do I want to spend my time? So for example, and I'm in a very different season of life from probably where you are, Chris. So I'm an empty nester. I don't have any young kids at home. I've got, time for a long morning ritual. I get up, as you mentioned earlier, at 4:45. I don't get into the office at 9. So I've got a long time to set myself up and do the really important things that a lot of people don't have time to do. When I was probably your age, I'd be lucky if I got in 10 or 15 minutes, and that was a win. But I was intentional about it. So whatever the time you have, so for me, it's a morning ritual. Then when I get to the office, I'm going to have a workday startup ritual, and I'm just going to take 30 minutes to kind of knock out the basic things, check my inboxes and all that, so that I can get to that deeper work, that more meaningful work that delivers the results my business needs to be successful. Then at the end of the day, I'm going to have a workday shutdown ritual, get about 30 to 45 minutes where I shut everything down so I can be totally free, go home, and be fully present with my family.
Yeah.
Weekends, I'm going to carve those out so that those are time that I'm going to be spent, what I use the metaphor of a stage, off stage time. There's a lot of people listening to this that probably don't know that you can legitimately have time off stage. You don't have to be always on. And so Saturdays are pretty much devoted to my family. Sunday, church in the morning, of course. Then in the afternoon, I usually visit my parents. But all this stuff goes into your ideal week. Then even in the middle of the week, I distinguish between what I call front stage time and backstage time. Yes. And so for all of us, there's front stage time. It's when we're delivering the results we're get paid to deliver. For me, the stage is literally the stage. It's, standing up and teaching a seminar or a coaching intensive or doing a podcast like this. That's front stage time. Backstage for me is all the things that I do to prepare. So whether that's preparing for a webinar or writing or preparing to get on the stage, but like for a lawyer, just to give you another example, a lawyer, for him, a front stage time might be that client facing time where he's, talking with the client and presenting, maybe a contract that he's prepared for a real estate deal or whatever. But the backstage time is where he's studying case law, he's writing the contract, he's doing all that. And so every profession, everybody has a front stage and a backstage. How would that look in your ideal week? What's the optimum ratio between those two so that you have plenty of time to prepare and yet time to deliver the results and really move the needle in your business? So that's basically what an ideal week is. So I literally, and I have the tool in the book, and you could download it also from the website, but the tool where you map out that ideal week, if you've got an executive assistant, you discuss it with them, discuss it with your spouse, and you say, look, I know that we're not going to get this every week, but I want us to work toward achieving this every week. I would say on average, we get about 80% of the way there because we want to be responsive to things that come in that sort of don't fit that box that we've shaped. But to the extent that we can, we try to shoehorn opportunities into that ideal week. Just to give you another concrete example, so for me, all internal meetings happen on Monday. So if somebody on my staff requests a meeting, I try to do that on Monday because I really need that. I have one day of backstage time on Tuesday and then 2 days of front stage times on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So we're doing this interview today. This is front stage time. It's exactly where it should be. So my external meetings, I do those on Friday and generally Friday morning. So if you happen to be in town and wanted to get with me for some reason, then the only time I would ever offer you, the only time Jim would offer you would be Friday morning. Now, will we make an exception to that? Yeah, occasionally we do. But for the most part, we want to put it in the ideal week because I don't want those disruptions to disrupt my front stage time and my backstage time on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does indeed. And I have to assume then you use a tactic that I've recently employed, and that's mega batching. You probably use that a lot in creating your ideal week, right?
Yeah, we do, totally. So just to give an example, for example, when we record the podcast, Megan and I have a podcast called Lead to Win. We like the word win too.
I love it.
And so we will record now 13 episodes in a day and a half. Oh, that's mega batching. And here's the rationale for doing it. When you do some kind of activity like that that's really intense, there's a certain ramp up time. We got to get the equipment set up. We got to kind of get into the headspace of it. And you get into that space. And if you only record one episode a week, which is what I used to do, and then you're out of it, then you got to do the same thing again. And so there's a lot of wasted effort in just sort of ramping up and ramping down. So what we do is we ramp up one and we get in that headspace where we're recording and we just get, on a roll. So we knock out 13 episodes. And then, and this is the beautiful part, Chris, we don't think about recording podcasts for another quarter, for another 90 days.
Wow.
That's mega batching.
That's powerful, Michael. That's really, I'm sure the content's just spot on too, because you're focused.
Totally focused. And, another example of that is, I have this coaching program called Business Accelerator. And with my Business Accelerator clients, we have about 350 clients. They come in cohorts of 50, and we do one day after another. And we do that for as many consecutive days as it takes to cover the cohorts. We'll have 10 of those cohorts by the end of the year. So 500, maybe 600 clients in that program. So we'll do it, and it feels kind of brutal, but honestly, we get in the groove and I love it. So for a couple of weeks, that's all I'm doing every day. A coaching intensive with that cohort of clients all day, next cohort, next day, next cohort, the next day. And then I don't think about it again for another 90 days.
Michael, we all have bad days. How often do you question whether or not you have what it takes to get the job done? When fear and shame and guilt knock at the door of your heart, what happens next? How does it manifest?
Well, first of all, it happens pretty frequently. And I would say that it's pretty normal for CEOs because, the challenges that I'm facing this year are very different than the challenges I faced last year. That's the problem with scaling. It's a different company than it was last year.
Yes.
When you grow 62%, it's different challenges. It's a different game. And so I would say that it's not unusual for me to have that thought once a day.
Wow.
But I've got this sign in my kitchen and it says, "Don't believe everything you think."
Yep.
And so just because that sentence is in my head doesn't mean I have to believe it. Now, like anybody else, I'm tempted to latch onto it and confuse it with the truth, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. Just because we think something doesn't mean it's the truth. And to be honest, this is one of the great things about having the kind of partnership I have in my marriage, because Gail is the one that I go to when I'm having doubts. And if I have doubts, or I'm discouraged, which usually happens at the end of the day, like it's been a long day, I'm tired, kind of spent. And so it'll be in the evening, maybe we're towards going to bed. And I'll say, I'm just a little bit discouraged.
Yeah.
And she will often say to me, well, let me just ask you, just a distinction. Are you discouraged or are you tired? Or I'd say, it was a really bad day. And she might say to me, was it a really bad day, or did you just have a few bad moments? I said, well, it was actually kind of a few bad moments. So one of the things that we've learned, and I learned this from my coach, Dan Sullivan, at the end of the day, and usually it's lying in bed, holding hands before we pray, we ask each other this question: what were your 3 wins for the day? Now, we do that because it's natural for us to go to the things that are wrong, the things that are missing, the things that didn't work. It's just how we're wired as humans. We tend to not take stock of our wins. We don't count our blessings, like the old hymn says. Yeah. And so we just decide that we're going to count our wins. What were my 3 wins? Now, we did this actually with the kids growing up. And it was funny because the kids would always say around the table, I have 5 daughters, and, we'd inevitably get one of them that said, I didn't have a win today. And so Gail would say, and I love this, she'd say, well, if you did, what would it have been? So she was relentless. So she would just not let them, and they learned over time, and the funny thing is they do it with their kids now, but they learned over time that mom was not going to let it go, that until they coughed up a win, we were not going to dismiss the family dinner. So Gail and I just continue to do that in our families. Now, in my journaling practice, because I journal every morning too, and if you've seen my Full Focus Journal, This is one of the 8 questions, but I say, what were your wins from yesterday or from today, depending on when you're journaling, but what were your biggest wins? And so I write those there too. I don't think we can focus too much on the wins. And that's what keeps me from sinking into despair or shame or doubt and I don't think it's, Pollyanna. I think it's perspective. Yes. It's taking not just the bad, you got to acknowledge that, but there's also the good. And that's too often what we're not thankful for, we don't remember.
Oh, Michael, thank you for that transparency. That's really a gift to all of us. And I suppose that's where I want to kind of ask our last question today that I have for you, because a lot of people listening are saying, maybe I'm not in the business space, but I'm a homemaker, or I'm leading a small group or a family. And I'd like to propose that Free to Focus, the book that you've just written, applies to everybody, no matter which vocation they're in, because I'd have to assume that, Michael, your marriage has improved, your parenting has improved as a result of being free to focus.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can be free to really focus on your work and to really focus on the people you're with, to look them right in the eye, to not be distracted by the cell phone or the smartphone. Yeah. If you can be free to be fully present. You take a homemaker, a young mom who's raising kids, and sometimes in, today's families, a young dad that's doing that, to be fully present with those kids. The freedom to be spontaneous, to be able to throw your head back and laugh and enjoy life. Laughter is the best way to defeat stress. The freedom just to do nothing and just to enjoy life. That's what, to kind of bring it back to where we started, that's going to be what's going to make us holistic people, where spirit, soul, and body, it's all working together. We're integrated people as God created us to be.
Oh, that's so good. Michael, is there anything else that we haven't talked about today that you'd like to leave with the listeners?
I think this is just one of those things that, to kind of come back to what we said earlier, this is one of those things that you've got to make a decision. All of us are at a fork in the road. And, you've got a choice about what your life is going to look like in 3 years. And if you just take the current trend, where the current trend is going, if you continue on the same path with regard to your health, with regard to your marriage, with regard to your job, with regard to your parenting, where is that road going to lead you in 3 years? Mm-hmm. And do you like that destination? And if you don't, the best time to make the change, you're never going to have a better opportunity to affect the outcome than right now. When people drift, you could drift to a place where it's too late, to reverse course. It's never too late, in a redemptive sense, but it's going to be much more difficult. So the sooner you make a decision, the sooner you get your path, get on the right path, the better off you're going to be.
Oh, so good. Michael, where's the best place for us to get Free to Focus today? And then how can we connect with you?
Yeah, so you can get the book wherever better books are sold, as they say. But I would encourage people to buy it wherever they want, Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever. But then head on over to freetofocusbook.com, because we have some amazing free bonuses there. And all you have to do is enter the number of your receipt there, and you'll immediately put your email address in, and it'll immediately send you a link where you can download those free bonuses. And in terms of connection, the best place to get me, all things related to me, is just at michaelhyatt.com, michaelhyatt.com. You can find my podcast there. You can find links to the Full Focus Planner, to the Focus Leader Program, Business Accelerator, all the rest.
Absolutely brilliant. Folks, he is Michael Hyatt, author of the brand new book, Free to Focus, a total productivity system to achieve more by doing less. Michael, this has been a treat because you're such a hero in my life. So thank you for taking the time for all of us here at Win today.
Thank you, Chris. Great interview and great to talk with you.
Thank you, sir. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Michael Hyatt. Recapping a couple key statements from the conversation, Michael said focusing on everything means focusing on nothing. I'm going to repeat that. Focusing on everything means focusing on nothing, my friend. Some of you listening right now are overwhelmed thinking, how in the world am I going to be enough, to do enough, to show up in the world, to get everything done for the people that matter most? Well, here's the thing. You don't have to do everything. If this is the first time you've heard it this week, awesome. You don't have to do everything. Instead, you have to learn how to become free to focus to do the right things. And that's exactly what we talked about with Michael today. Michael went on to say, no one ever drifted to a destination they would have chosen. Man, was that a powerful statement. And that, my friend, is precisely why we have to employ the very tactics Michael shared with us today so that life is both intentional and effective. So go grab a copy of his new book, Free to Focus, right now at freetofocusbook.com. Plenty of awesome bonuses available when you purchase there. I'll also have links to purchase at wintoday.tv. And hey, if today's conversation resonated with you and you know it would help a friend, I want you to text 5 people right now, and share the link to this episode, whether on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google, and encourage them to listen and learn how to become free to focus. Well, next week here on the show, I'm joined by one of America's favorite personalities, host of TLC's Trading Spaces and the iconic Extreme Makeover Home Edition, Ty Pennington. We're diving into his own story and talking about courage, hope, dealing with loss, and his own battle with ADHD. Here's a preview.
All of us, and even the people that have success, find moments of hopelessness. I mean, look, sadness comes in at times in our lives, even in our happiest moments. You can have these random weird, days where you just don't feel great about yourself or your life or your relationship or where you're going or God forbid, or also, later on in life and like what's happening to your mind, etc. But I think the most important message anyone can give to anyone is, it's the simple one, which is tomorrow's another day. Like whatever is bothering you today, it may not be there tomorrow. I mean, it's not like the problem's going to go away, but there's a reason to believe that things are going to get better.
That's next week, right here on Win Today. Do not miss my conversation with Ty Pennington. Hey, many of you are brand new listeners of Win Today, and for that, I just want to say thank you. So if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now on whichever podcast host you're tuning into. And each and every week, a fresh episode of the show will arrive to you automatically. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, will you take 30 seconds right now to rate and write a review of the show? Doing so helps grow the listenership of Win Today, and that would mean so much to me. Well, hey, until next week, visit me over at wintoday.tv for blog posts and archive podcasts, all aimed at helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.